Hi, I'm Emily Rodda, author of Deltora Quest, Fairy Realm, Rowan of Rin, and a lot of other books. A lot of you sent in questions for me to answer. I'm here to answer as many of them as I can.
Hello, Emily. I have two questions for you. Do you believe in mythical creatures? And when did you start writing books?
I do want to believe in mythical creatures. Let me put it that way. And I often feel I see them. To my family's disgust. I see dragons in the sky. I see strange creatures wandering around the forest where I live. There are a lot of creatures that we haven't actually discovered in our own world. So why shouldn't there be creatures we think of as being mythical? As for when I started writing books, I was in my 30s. It was when my daughter was 7 and my second child was 2, and I just started writing then. Although I had always wanted to be a writer, I hadn't written before that.
My name is James. I am 9 years old and I live in Oburua, and my question for you is, what was your favourite book when you were a kid?
I had a lot of favourite books, I have to say. When I was really little, it was Snuggle Pot and Cuddle Pie, as a matter of fact. When I got older, there was this great big book of fairy tales and legends that had been actually my mother's book when she was little. And it had so many tales in it. And I think maybe that was the book that made me love fairy tales and legends so much. It's nice to see you holding your Deltora Quest, and I guess we owe Deltora Quest to that big fat red book that I read so long ago. So, Emily, why do I change my name when I write? My very, very first book I sent in to a publishing company under a different name from my own. And that was because I worked in publishing and a lot of people in book publishing knew me, and I was kind of shy. And so when the book was published, it was actually published under this other name, Emily Rodda, which is my grandmother's name. And then the following year, that book, which was called Something Special, won the Children's Book of the Year award. So it made sense to keep the same name, and I have kept that same name all this time. And in fact, I answer to Emily Rodda just as easily as I do to my own name. Shion24 of Kagoshima wants to know, what was my grandmother, the real Emily Rodda, like? My grandmother, my actual grandmother, was a small, fair, pretty, laughing lady. She was indeed. She wasn't a great reader or anything like that, but she was just about the best grandmother any child could have. She gave me such great times, and I loved her very, very much. Her mother, who was also called Emily Rodda, was a big character in every way. I chose the name Emily Rodda simply because I thought it was a great name. I really liked it. But I'm glad I chose it because it reminds me all the time of my grandmother and my great-grandmother. Thomas wants to know what I think my Glim name would be. Oh, that's such a good question, and I haven't even thought of an answer. Let me see, what would I choose? Oh, I don't know. Maybe I'd choose Nin, N-I-N, which is what my little brother used to call me when I was when he was really little and couldn't say my name properly. And it's what my grandchildren call me now. Coco from Auckland. What is your favourite animal? I think I can't go past dogs because they are my absolute favourite animal. Our own dog, Sadie, I much love. I can't go past dogs, although I admire many other animals. And the next question from Coco is, when you were young, did people tell you you had promise as a writer? Well, yes, they did. When I was at school, people used to say that. They used to say I had good imagination and I wrote well. And certainly when I was in primary school, I always wanted to be a writer and I was writing all the time. When I got to be in high school, I lost a lot of confidence. I was still told that I wrote well, but once I started reading really great books, I thought, oh, I'm silly to think that I'm ever going to be this thing that I regarded as the best thing in the world, which is being a writer. Anyone who wants to be a writer, who's out there, I urge you, don't waste time like I did by losing confidence or thinking that you can't be the absolute best. Just write for yourself. Just do that. That's my advice.
Hi, I'm Pippa Burnett from Brisbane. I would like to know what book of yours you would recommend for a grade 3 student. I have never read one of your books before, but I am super intrigued. My sister loves your books and she has the same name, Emily. Thank you.
I've just done some new books called the Monty's Island books, Gary, Mary and the Stripe Spell. And the second one is called Beady Bold and the Yum Yams. They would be perfect for someone in grade 3.
Hi, my name is Sadie and I am 7 years old. My question is, what is the hardest bit about inventing a story?
Well, hello Sadie. And I see you've got a golden Labrador, and so do we. And you know what our golden Labrador is called? She's called Sadie. Isn't that a big coincidence? Now, the hardest part about inventing a story, well, I think possibly the hardest part is starting. Sometimes people, you might have a good idea, but a good idea isn't quite enough. You need good characters. You need a fair idea, in my case, of where the story is going or how it's going to end. Sometimes I have a bit of trouble actually starting the book. And I know a lot of people find the same. They find just writing that first sentence is so difficult. And my advice on that is this. If you can't think of the perfect sentence to start, just leave the beginning right out and work on the stuff that you are confident about doing.
Hello, I'm Killian. I'm 9 years old and my question is, how long does it take for you to plan your books? I mean, you can't make up a mystery story as you go.
I have to say, depends on the book. I have spent a couple of weeks thinking about a book because the idea is fairly small and doesn't take long to think of the plan. But for something like Deltora Quest, which perhaps at your age you've read, I actually spent a couple of years thinking about Deltora Quest before I started writing it. Oh, Killian, I can see you dressed up as Rye for the Three Doors trilogy for Book Week. That's great. And you've got the bag of objects. And you found a perfect bell tree stick. Oh, good on you.
What goes through your mind when you're creating the characters and the plot and the places that you do?
When I'm thinking about people and places, I try to imagine I'm living in the place, in the world of my story. I try to think, how does it smell? How does it taste? What can I hear when I'm in the world? I pretend I'm in the world, and after a while I start to believe I really am. Before I start to write a word of the actual book, I have got to know my characters and my place, my world. I've got to know them as well as I know my friends and family. In fact, I feel I know my fantasy worlds just as well as I know the real world. Better sometimes, I think. Okay, so Frida from Melbourne says that she started writing stories and she's been thinking of starting a Zoom online narrative writing club with her friends. And do I talk to other authors? I don't talk to other authors about my books. For me, it's a very personal thing and it doesn't work so well for me talking to other people about my stories. It's better for me to envelop myself in the world and stay there. I sometimes worry that talking about a book too much or a story that's evolving will sort of rub the magic off it. And yet other people love talking about their works in progress. And creative writing classes, of course, work in that way. You should do whatever makes it easier for you and whatever you like the best.
In Rowan and the Bookshire, who will you be? In Deltora Quest, how do you pronounce the name of the hero? Bye. Bye.
Thanks, James and Elizabeth. In Rowan of the Buckshire, in the whole Rowan series, I think I identify most with Rowan. You'd have to say that because he is my main character and he's the one whose thoughts that I know. The hero in Deltora Quest, I guess you're talking about Leaf. That's how you pronounce him, Leaf, like a leaf on a tree.
What is your favourite book that you've read?
Well, my favourite book is something people do ask me quite a lot, and it's almost impossible for me to say, because every book that I'm writing at the time, that's my favourite book, I guess, because I feel so close to it. Every book has its own flavour, and you remember them all with a lot of love, like your family. And in fact, I have no trouble thinking about my characters, all these characters that I've written all these years, as real, and I feel them around me all the time. I think of them like real people. Audrey of Yarraville wants to know what a buckshire looks like. A bit like a bison, perhaps, would be a good way to describe it, but not quite. They've got these woolly manes, they're very big, they're very gentle. Francis of Yarraville, what inspired his name is Walter. Driving with my husband Bob through the country and noticing these houses that seemed deserted by the side of the road, it suddenly came to me, I wonder if that house has stories to tell. The fairy tale that is embedded within the book, His Name is Walter, was inspired by the early life of my own husband, Bob, who grew up in an orphanage. I'm glad you like it so much. It is different from my others, partly because it's got a rather sad ending, but it's happy too, isn't it? It's life-affirming, the ending.
What were your main sources of inspiration when you were creating the world of Deltora Quest? Because it's such a rich universe, so I'm wondering where all that came from.
I wanted to write a quest. I'd written some of Rowan books before that. I wanted to write a quest that was more complicated. I'd also got quite interested in the whole idea of collecting things at the time. I sort of liked the idea of separate books in which heroes had to collect certain things. So I started thinking about what could be collected. I decided in the end jewels, gems would be a good idea because they're so easy to hide, but also they would be okay left in water, for example, or in mud, or, they wouldn't be destroyed by that. Great gems in folklore are supposed to have all these powers. They've always been regarded as having special powers. The idea that from within the earth of this place came these great gems, that they were somehow put in a place, I decided, on a belt because it was more interesting than a crown. And by keeping them all together, it kept the kingdom safe. That's more or less what happened, but I did think about it and write notes about it, the whole world, for a couple of years before I started writing. Angelica, she says Mavis is a great name for a goat, and do I know anybody named Mavis? As a matter of fact, I do. I've just remembered. I do know a friend of my mother's was called Mavis, but that wasn't why I called my goat Mavis. I just came upon Mavis because I agree with you. I think it's a perfect name for a goat. And so that's where Mavis came from.
In Deltora Quest 2, what is the Piran pipe? The only powerful object powerful enough to combat the Shadow Lord made of?
Well, Max, I think my idea was that the Pirin pipe was just made of wood like other flutes. But perhaps you're right. Perhaps it was something unusual and different from a special tree, perhaps.
Will you ever make another series of Deltora Quest?
I'm not planning on making another Deltora Quest series because I felt I'd told the story. I'd got to the end of that story. I feel it's a mistake to keep going when you feel the story has been told. And I feel it's up to readers now to think about what might have happened next. Amanda wants to know about Teen Power Inc. She says she's a long-time fan, has collected it in almost every language. She asks, where do I see each of the gang now? Well, I've always thought that Liz was going to be a writer. I think she's decided that by the end of the series. Tom is obviously going to be a painter. Elmo is going to either stay running the pen or go off and be a journalist somewhere else, because that's his thing, isn't it? But he'll probably, even if he does go off and be a journalist somewhere else, he'll come back to the pen because that's his family business. Nick, well, he loved computers and things like that, but I somehow think Nick might go off and study law. That seemed to me like the sort of thing he might do. And who else? Rochelle. Gosh, what would Rochelle do? I think by now she'd probably have children and perhaps be a fashion advisor. Oh, that would suit Michelle. I don't think she'll ever make it into movies like she hoped, but I think she could easily be in fashion. And then there's Sunny. Sunny, look, I actually think Sunny would probably by now, because that was quite a while ago, she's such a champion. So I think she would have probably had an excellent sporting career, and now she would be coaching a team of some sort. That's what she would like, I think. Here are some questions from Year 4, West End State School, Queensland. Hi. What inspired me to write fantasy books? Well, my great love of fantasy, I guess. I always think the important thing is to write what you really enjoy reading, and I have always loved actually, legends, folk tales, fairy tales of all sorts. What inspired me to make Rowan of Rin? I was watching my children playing computer games, video games actually, and I noticed how many of them had fantasy elements in them, had things like the 3 wishes, the shop where you go and buy strange objects, saving the princess from the castle. In other words, all the traditional things that come out of fairy tales. And I thought, how these people have stolen the stuff that is all that books used to be all about, and stories and tales. That was, I suppose, my inspiration. That and the fact that I had twin sons who were very different in personality. And I wanted to show that you didn't have to be big, strong and sporty to be brave. That in fact, to be brave meant feeling fear first. That is the real sign of when someone is really brave. The riddles in Rowan of Rin, I wrote them down just as a sentence first, and then I changed that sentence into rhymes. Where you've got a word that's difficult to rhyme, don't put it at the end of the line. Use it somewhere in the middle of the line. The name ideas, like Strong John, Star, Rowan, Gilla, Alan. What gave me the ideas for those names? Well, originally, when I first wrote the book, they were just ordinary names. All of the names are a little bit like our names, but they're just a bit different. Like, instead of being called Jill, Jill is called Gilla. Instead of being called Alan, spelt in the normal way, it's Alan spelt with a U. That just took it a little bit out of our world, but still made the names easy to pronounce and easy to say.
I really love your books. I've read lots of them, and I was wondering, are you gonna make a new series, add on to your series, or just make a book that's not gonna have a series? And do you think maybe if you're gonna make a new one and you don't have an idea, could you make a book about a strong female pirate captain?
Well, Odette, it's very strange. You're too old for this book, but I have actually written a book just recently, but it's for much younger children. I've written these Monty's Island books, and the first one, well, she's not a very nice person, I have to say, this pirate captain. She's called Scary Mary, but she is not as good looking as you, I can tell you, and she's got these terrible sharpened teeth, and she's very mean and awful, but she's very powerful. My next book, well, there's going to be another one in the Monty's Island series coming out first, and I don't think I can really tell you what's coming later, but there are a couple of books coming after that I'm certain, hoping that you'll like. There's one towards the end of next year, which might be just suit you at night. Thank you so much. I've so enjoyed answering all your questions. I wish I could have got to them all. Happy reading.